He had not slept in 11 days. Not because he couldn't, because he didn't trust what came when he did. The dreams. The same dream, every time, since the night his father died in his arms and pressed a secret into his chest that had been burning there ever since. He was the most feared alpha alive. 3 packs had surrendered without a single fight just because he arrived at their borders. Grown warriors went silent when they heard his name. Children were hushed with it in the dark. And yet, there was one woman in the entire world who had looked directly into his eyes on the worst night of his life, and had not flinched, not even a little. She hadn't known who he was. She still didn't know. And what he was about to do, what he was about to ask of her, was either the bravest thing he had ever done, or the thing that was finally going to destroy him. If this is your first time here, and you ended up on this video, welcome. You found us at exactly the right moment. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and drop in the comments where in the world you're watching from right now. We've got people watching from New York to Jamaica, from Istanbul to London, from Manila to Melbourne, and every single one of you makes this worth doing. Now, back to the most feared alpha alive, and the woman who had no idea what she just walked into. Her name was Ren. Not the bird, though people made that comparison often. Small, quick, gone before you noticed she'd been there. It was her grandmother's name, and her grandmother's grandmother's name before that, passed down the female line of her family the way certain things got passed, not with ceremony, but with quiet intention, like a hand slipped into yours in the dark. Ren had grown up in the Ashvale settlement. Not a full pack, not quite. More of a community. The kind of place that formed when wolves who didn't fit neatly into pack structure found each other by accident and decided, collectively, that the accident was good enough to build on. There were 43 of them. No alpha. No formal hierarchy. A council of 7 that rotated membership every 2 years and made decisions by consensus, which was sometimes maddening and sometimes, on the days it worked, genuinely beautiful. They had a healer, 3 hunters, a dozen farmers, teachers, craftspeople. Ren was none of those things, officially. She was the one you called when none of those things were enough. She had a gift that she could not fully explain and had stopped trying to. She could feel what other people were feeling, not in the vague, imprecise way that most empathic wolves could, but specifically, granularly. She could tell the difference between the grief of losing a person and the grief of losing a version of yourself. She could feel when someone's pain was from the outside and when it was growing from the inside, slow and quiet, like something wrong underground. She had never met anyone who had this in the same way. Her mother had called it a blessing. There had been moments, over the years, when Ren wasn't so sure. Because feeling everything, all the time, meant that the world arrived at her with no buffer between her and it. It meant that she had learned, out of pure survival necessity, to wear a particular kind of stillness. A calm that people sometimes mistook for coldness. She wasn't cold. She was the opposite of cold. She was simply managing the fact of feeling everything too much by moving through the world very, very carefully. She had a small house at the eastern edge of the settlement. She kept a garden. She read. She helped when she was needed and stepped back when she wasn't. She had, by most external measures, a quiet and small life. She was 31 years old, and she had never once regretted the smallness of it, until the night a stranger arrived at the settlement gate, and the weight of what was coming off him hit her from 20 feet away like a physical blow. She had been in the garden. Late evening. The sky had gone the color of a bruise above the eastern tree line, deep purple fading to black at the edges. She had been harvesting the last of the season's herbs, moving along the rows in the familiar, repetitive way that she found centering after a long day. She felt him before the gate warden called out. The feeling was not subtle. It was enormous. She didn't have a better word for it. Like standing on a hillside when a storm is still 20 miles away and feeling the pressure change around you. The air itself becoming different. She stood up. The gate warden's voice, stranger at the gate. Alone. No pack markers. And then the feeling hit again, closer now, and she understood in the deep instinctive way that bypassed rational thought entirely that whatever was walking through that gate was not simply tired or lost. Whatever was walking through that gate was in genuine, serious, particular pain. She was at the gate before the council had even been notified. She didn't know why she moved that fast. She would think about this later and not have a clean answer. She rounded the corner of the long fence that bordered the settlement's entrance and stopped. He was on one knee. Not because he had been forced there. Not because anyone had put him there. Because he had arrived at the gate of a small settlement in the middle of nowhere with no supplies and no coat despite the temperature, and his legs had apparently decided that far enough was far enough. He was massive. Even on one knee he was. The word that came to her was large, but that wasn't quite right. Substantial. He had the kind of build that came from years of actual physical work rather than training for appearance. His hair was dark and too long, like he had not thought about it in months. There was a gash along his left forearm that had been roughly bandaged with what looked like a strip of his own shirt. The gate warden, a steady, cautious man named Orvin, was standing back a careful distance with his hand near his weapon, watching the kneeling stranger with the alert uncertainty of someone who was not sure whether what he was looking at was a threat or a casualty. Wren walked past Orvin. "Hey," she said, to the kneeling man. He looked up. His eyes were dark, very dark, the kind of eyes that didn't reflect light easily, that seemed to take it in and hold it rather than giving it back. He was looking at her with an expression she recognized. She recognized it the way she recognized most things, through feeling rather than analysis. He was exhausted in a way that had gone all the way through him, past muscle and bone, down to something deeper and more essential. He was exhausted in his soul. "I'm not a threat," he said. His voice was very deep and very controlled, even now, even on one knee in the dirt. "I know," she said. This seemed to surprise him. "I just need," he started. "A night," she said. "Maybe two." He looked at her. "You're projecting," she said. "Not deliberately. But you are. I can feel what you need. You need to stop moving." She tilted her head. "Can you stand?" A pause. "Yes," he said. He stood, and she had to adjust her understanding of his scale upward considerably. He was very tall. The kind of tall that made you recalculate distances. He looked at her, standing there in her garden boots with herbs sticking out of the pocket of her work apron, and she could feel the confusion moving through him alongside the exhaustion. "I can pay," he said. "The settlement doesn't take payment from people who need a place to stop," she said. "We have a guest room. Come on." She walked back through the gate. After a moment, she heard his footsteps follow. His name was Corveth. He gave it to her when she was cleaning the gash on his arm, which had been roughly treated and needed proper attention. He sat very still while she worked, which she appreciated. Most people fidgeted during wound care. He had the stillness of someone who had learned to tolerate discomfort without showing it. She did not ask him anything beyond what she needed to know for the wound. He volunteered the name on his own, like he felt he owed her at least that. "Corveth," she said, tying off the clean bandage. "That's not a common name." "No," he said. "Old language," she said. Something about iron, I think. Or a blade. Both, he said, and something moved in his expression that she couldn't immediately identify. My father's choice. She did not follow this thread. She put away her supplies and poured him the tea she had made, something that would help with sleep, which she suspected he needed desperately, and sat across from him at the small table in her kitchen. What you said at the gate, he said. About feeling what I needed. Yes. You're an empath. Of a kind, she said. I've known empaths, he said. None of them knew what I needed before I said a word. Most empaths feel emotional states, she said. Fear, grief, anger. I feel more specifically than that. She wrapped her hands around her own cup. You don't have to talk about what brought you here. The guest room is at the end of the hall. There's a clean set of clothes on the chair. My neighbor is about your height. He leaves things here sometimes. Use whatever fits. He looked at her. He was doing it again. That thing where he looked at her like he was trying to figure out what she was. Not suspicious, exactly. More like encountering something he didn't have a category for. You're not afraid of me, he said. No, she said. You should be. Probably, she said easily. And yet here we are. She stood and took her cup to the counter. The tea will help you sleep. Try to drink all of it. She went to bed. She lay in the dark and listened to the silence of the guest room at the end of the hall and felt, with that too specific gift of hers, the shape of what was in the house with her. Pain. Enormous, layered pain. Grief. The kind that had been sitting for a while, compressed. Beneath that, something else. Something she had no name for at first. She lay very still and focused on it. It felt like a man gripping something he could not afford to put down, but could not much longer afford to keep holding either. It felt like the moment just before something broke. She fell asleep thinking about this. In the morning, when she got up, she went to the kitchen and found the teacup washed and dried and placed neatly on the counter, and the chair at the table pushed in precisely. She stood in her kitchen and looked at these small, careful signs of a person trying to take up as little space as possible, and something moved in her chest. He was in the garden. She had not asked him to go there. She had not suggested it. But she came outside in the early morning and found him at the far end of her herb beds, crouching down, examining something. When she got close enough, she saw what it was. He was looking at the frost damage on the sage plants. The overnight temperature had dropped, and she hadn't covered them. Rosemary survives it, he said, without looking up. Sage, thyme, and marjoram are more vulnerable. She stopped beside him. You know plants. I grew up around healers, he said. He looked up at her. In the morning light, his face looked different than it had the night before. Not softer, exactly, but more specific. She could see things she hadn't seen in the dimmer light of her kitchen. The line of an old scar across his jaw. The shadow under his eyes that said he had slept, but not enough. The way his expression was doing several things at once, and only one of those things was visible on the surface. You grew up in a pack, she said. He looked at her sideways. The way you said healers, she said. In a pack you say the healers. In a community without a formal structure you say our healers, or the people who heal here. You said it the pack way, like it was an institution. He was quiet for a moment. You notice things, he said. I notice everything, she said. It's inconvenient, mostly. She crouched beside him and looked at the sage damage. He was right. The leaves at the tips were dark and softened. She sighed. I should have covered them, she said. I can help you cover the rest, he said. If you have cloth. She looked at him. He looked back. She had a rule. She had always had it. In the 20 years since she'd been old enough to be responsible for her own decisions, about asking people questions they weren't ready to answer. She thought it was the most common mistake people made with one another. Asking the question at the wrong time, pushing before the other person was ready, and then being frustrated when they closed up. She was willing to wait. She had always been willing to wait. "There's burlap in the shed," she said. "And string." He stood. He was even taller standing up, which she had somehow forgotten overnight. "What do you know about frost protection?" she asked as they walked to the shed. "Enough," he said. "Not as much as you, probably." "We'll see," she said. And that was the morning. He stayed. Not indefinitely. Not with any announcement. He simply was still there on the second morning, and then the third, and somewhere in the middle of the first week it became a fact of the settlement the way all gradual facts became, quietly, without official declaration. The stranger, Corveth, was staying for a while. He helped with things. He worked hard, which people noticed and respected. He helped with the repair of the fence along the northern edge, which had been in need of attention for a season. He helped one of the farmers clear a field that was being broken for the first time. He split wood for two of the older residents who had asked for help and been waiting. He did all of this without being asked, without making a production of it, without seeming to need anything in return beyond the space to do it. The settlement watched him with the wariness that all close communities had for outsiders, which slowly, over the days, began to soften. Not because he charmed them. He was not charming, exactly. He was present, in the way that certain people were present. You were aware of him in a room. Not because he demanded attention, but because something in the atmosphere around him changed when he was there. Wren observed all of this from the measured distance she kept from most things. She also noticed that he came back to her kitchen every evening. Not intrusively, not asking for anything. Sometimes he brought something. Firewood, once a brace of rabbits from a hunt, once a handful of mushrooms he'd found in the forest and correctly identified without being asked. He would set these things down, and she would add them to whatever she was making, and they would eat and talk. Or not talk. Both were comfortable. She could not fully remember the last time she had been comfortable with silence in someone else's company. She filed this away. She did not examine it immediately. She noticed that he rarely laughed, but when something struck him as genuinely funny, a very specific thing happened at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. The shape that came before the real thing decided whether or not to show up. She began, privately, to catalog the things that produced this expression. She noticed that he remembered everything she said, not in the unsettling way of someone constructing a file, in the natural way of someone who actually listened. She noticed that he slept badly. She could feel it from her room at the other end of the house, not the specific content of dreams, but the disturbance of them. The way a person could feel, through a building, the shape of someone else's restlessness. She made him different tea after the fourth night. He looked at the cup and then at her. "It's not sedation," she said. "It won't knock you out. It just takes the edge off the dreaming." He held the cup and didn't drink immediately. "How do you know about the dreaming?" he asked. "I told you," she said. "I feel things specifically." He drank the tea. That night, the restlessness she felt through the wall was less. Not gone, but less. In the morning, he stood in her kitchen with an expression she had not seen on him before. "Thank you," he said. Like the words cost him something, but he was paying willingly. "Anytime," she said. And the way he looked at her when she said that, the way something shifted behind his dark eyes, she felt it like a chord struck somewhere below the level of sound. She turned back to the stove. She reminded herself about her rules. She reminded herself that she noticed everything, and was therefore more susceptible than most to reading things into moments that were simply moments. She stirred her pot. She thought, I am being an idiot. And then she thought, but I can feel him. I can feel what is actually there. And what is actually there is. She stirred the pot harder. On the 9th day, the council asked to speak with him. This was not unexpected. The settlement's council had given him time, which was their practice with travelers, but there were people in the settlement who were asking questions that needed answering. Who was he? Why was he here? Was he planning to leave? Ren was not on the council. She had been asked to join twice and had declined both times, on the grounds that she already felt too much of other people's emotional business and did not need to also be formally responsible for their governance. But Petal, who was on the council, and who was also one of Ren's oldest friends in the settlement, came to tell her about the meeting before it happened. They're going to ask him to name his pack of origin, Petal said. Petal was a small, precise woman with iron-gray hair and the permanently slightly worried expression of someone who cared deeply about things going well and was always 2 steps ahead of the ways they might not. I know, Ren said. He's not going to want to answer that, Petal said. I know. Ren. Petal looked at her steadily. Do you know who he is? Ren looked up from the book she had been pretending to read. Should I? I've been watching him, Petal said. The way he carries himself. The way the men react to him even when they don't want to. The way he surveyed the perimeter of this settlement on his first full day without appearing to do it. These are not habits of a packless wolf. Ren was quiet. I think, Petal said carefully, that he is someone powerful. I think he may be someone very powerful. And I think you may be the only person in this settlement he has been fully honest with, which puts you in a position I would like you to be careful about. Ren considered this. I'm being careful, she said. Petal gave her the look of a person who was unconvinced but was choosing not to push further. The meeting is tomorrow morning, she said. And she left. Ren sat with her book and did not read it. She thought about what she knew and what she didn't. She thought about the things she had felt from him, that enormous, specific pain, the grief, the weight of something being carried. She thought about the particular way that weight sat on him, not the weight of personal loss alone, the weight of something larger, the weight of being responsible for others, of knowing that the things you did and didn't do had consequences that reached past yourself. She knew what that felt like from the outside. She had spent 31 years feeling what was inside other people. That feeling, the specific heaviness of it, she had felt it before. She had felt it on the 3 occasions in her life when she had been near a pack alpha. Her stomach moved slowly. She closed her book. She went and stood in the doorway of the garden and looked at the last light going out of the sky and thought about rules and waiting and the feeling she had been carefully not examining for 9 days. He was at the table when she came back inside. He was sitting with his hands flat on the surface, and he was staring at nothing in the particular way of someone who has made a decision and is sitting with the weight of it. She sat across from him. You heard, she said. The council meeting, he said. Yes. They're going to ask you your pack of origin. I know. She waited. He looked at his hands. If I tell you something, he said, I need to know whether you will tell them before I do. She met his eyes. If you ask me not to, no. Why not? They are your community. They are your responsibility. They are, she said. And so is the truth. Which means if you tell me something true that you haven't been ready to say in a public room, I will hold it until you are ready. Because that is also how I serve this community. By being a person that people can trust with things before they're ready to say them. He looked at her for a long time. That thing was happening again. The thing where he looked at her like she was something he didn't have a category for. "My name is Corveth Marin," he said. She heard the name, and the world went very quiet. She knew that name. Everyone who had lived near a pack border in the last 15 years knew that name. Corveth Marin, the alpha of the Greyfall pack, the largest, oldest, and most militarily formidable pack in the Northern Territories. The alpha who had ended the 7-year border war not by negotiating but by walking, alone, onto the battlefield and doing something that the people who had been there still didn't agree on exactly, except that it had stopped the fighting instantly and permanently. The alpha whose name 3 packs had surrendered to without a fight. The alpha about whom there were stories that started with fear and ended in more fear, different kinds, layered. She sat across the small kitchen table from this man. She had been making him tea. She had been covering her plants with him in the early morning. She had felt his dreams through the wall. She had made him laugh, once, 9 days ago, by saying something she hadn't meant to be funny, and she had been privately cataloging what produced the ghost smile at the corner of his mouth. She breathed. "All right," she said. He looked at her. "That's all." "All right. I'm processing," she said. "Give me a moment." She sat with it. The alpha of the Greyfall pack was sitting in her kitchen. The alpha of the Greyfall pack had helped her cover her sage plants in the frost. The alpha of the Greyfall pack had washed and dried his teacup and placed it neatly on the counter and pushed his chair in precisely because he was trying to take up as little space as possible. The alpha of the Greyfall pack had not slept in 11 days before he arrived at her gate. She looked at him. "Why are you here?" she asked. Not in the council's way. Not as an interrogation. She said it with the gentleness she used when she was asking something that mattered. He looked at his hands. "My father," he said. "He died 4 months ago." She already knew it was grief. She had known it was grief since the first night. "I'm sorry," she said. "He told me something," Corveth said. "The night he died. He had a secret he had been keeping for my entire life. He pressed it into my hands as he was dying, and he said, I needed to know. He said it would change everything." "Did it?" "Yes," he said. The word was flat and enormous at the same time. "It changed the way I understand my pack. What it was built on. What I've been," he stopped. Pressed his lips together briefly. "What I've been defending." She let the silence hold. "I couldn't stay in the territory," he said. "I couldn't stand in my own hall and look at my pack and know what I know and not. I needed to be somewhere that didn't have the weight of it. Just for a moment. Just long enough to figure out what I do next. And you found us," she said. "I wasn't looking for anything specifically," he said. "I just walked until my legs quit on me. Fortunate that they quit here," she said. He looked at her. The ghost smile. Brief. Real. "Yes," he said. "Fortunate." He told the council the truth the next morning. Not all of it. Not the secret his father had told him. But his name, his pack, and the honest bare outline of why he was here. The council received this with the suspended, careful quiet of a room full of people recalibrating very quickly. Petal looked at Ren exactly once, across the gathering space. Ren looked back with an expression she hoped communicated, "I know. We will talk later." The council asked their questions carefully. Corveth answered them without evasion. Was he here, representing the Greyfall pack? No. Did the Greyfall pack know where he was? No. Did he intend the Ashvale settlement any harm? No. Was he asking for anything beyond the hospitality already extended? No. The council deliberated. Briefly. And then they did something Ren thought was quietly magnificent. They told him he could stay as long as he needed. Not because they weren't cautious. Not because they hadn't thought carefully about the implications of hosting the alpha of the Greyfall pack in their settlement without his pack knowing where he was, but because they had watched him for 9 days. And what they had seen was a man who worked without being asked and took nothing he hadn't been given and was trying, quietly, and without making it anyone else's problem, to carry something very heavy. And this settlement, of 43 people who had all found each other by accident and decided the accident was good enough to build on, understood what it was to need a place to put things down for a while. So they said, "You can stay." Ren, walking home after the meeting, felt something in her chest that she recognized as the particular pride she felt when the community she lived in reminded her of why she had chosen it. Corveth fell into step beside her. "They didn't have to do that," he said. "No," she agreed. "Why did they?" "Because they know what it is to need a place," she said. "Most of them came here for the same reason you did. Not this exact situation, but the same essential situation. Something happened, and they needed somewhere that didn't know about it yet. Somewhere they could be just a person for a while." He was quiet. "This settlement," he said. "It has no alpha." "No." "How does it?" He stopped. "Tried again. How does it function?" Slowly, she said. "By consensus. By argument and agreement and occasional shouting, and then consensus again." She glanced at him. "You think it sounds chaotic. I think it sounds unlike anything I've ever known." "It is," she said. "It took getting used to. I grew up partly in a pack and partly here, and it was a significant adjustment, but I would not trade it." He looked at her as they walked. "You grew up in a pack," he said. "Until I was 14. My mother brought us here then. She had her reasons." She looked forward. A story for another time. He accepted this without pushing. They walked the rest of the way to her house in a silence that was, she noticed, entirely comfortable. The days continued. 15. 20. The settlement settled around his presence the way settlements do, slowly incorporating a new thing until it was simply part of the texture. Ren kept her careful distance, or she told herself she did. In practice, she was aware that her careful distance had been shifting incrementally since around day 3, and that by now it was more of a theoretical concept than an actual spatial reality. She knew when he entered a room before she saw him, not because of his size or his reputation, because of the feeling, the specific signature of him, which she had, despite herself and her better judgment, learned so well by now that it was as distinct to her as a voice. One evening, around the 3rd week, she was sitting in the main room of her house reading when he came in from outside. He had been helping with something in the dark, some settlement task that had run long, and the cold came in with him, and he shook it off and sat down in the chair across from her, and she realized with a start that he looked like he belonged there. The chair, her house, the lamplight. It looked natural. It looked, in fact, like something that had always been there, and she had simply not noticed. She went back to her book. She read the same sentence 4 times. "Ren," he said. You haven't turned a page in 6 minutes." She looked up. He was watching her with the particular quality of attention she had come to understand meant that he had decided to say something. "The secret," he said. "My father's secret." She set the book down. He leaned forward with his forearms on his knees. "He told me," he said slowly, "that the Greyfall Pack's founding, the land it sits on, the resources it controls, the trade agreements that make it what it is, was taken." She waited. "Not in battle," he said. "Not through any legitimate challenge or negotiation." His voice was very even. She could feel the effort behind that evenness. "There was a pack. A smaller one. 40 years ago. They had held that territory for 6 generations. My grandfather made an arrangement with another pack to pressure them from both sides simultaneously. The smaller pack didn't have the numbers to fight on 2 fronts. They were forced to abandon their territory or be destroyed. The silence was very complete. He made it look like a natural contraction, he said. Like the smaller pack had simply run out of resources and left. But they were driven out. Deliberately. With planning. What happened to them? Ren asked. They scattered, he said. Some joined other packs. Some came to places like this, settlements, communities. Some just. He shook his head. My father was young then. He was not the alpha yet. But he knew. And he kept it from me for my entire life because he thought, his jaw tightened, he thought it would be better if I believed the pack was clean. She felt the layers of this. The grief of losing his father. And underneath it, the more complicated grief of losing the version of his father he had believed in. And underneath that, the question that was eating him alive. What do you do with it? She said. He looked at her. You've been carrying this for 4 months, she said. And you've been walking with it alone. So what are you trying to figure out? What does doing the right thing look like from where you are? He was very still. The people who were driven out, he said. Some of them are still alive. The generation that was young when it happened. The first generation born after. He stopped. I've been tracking down information. Before I came here. That's partly why I left. I needed to move around without the pack around me. Asking questions they couldn't know I was asking yet. And have you found them? She asked. Some. What do they want? He looked at her with an expression that was complicated and clear at the same time. I haven't asked yet, he said. Because I needed to know first if I was willing to. He stopped. Tried again. My grandfather built what I lead. My father maintained it. I have given 15 years of my life to it. If I try to make this right, it could mean the end of the Greyfall pack as it exists. Or, she said quietly, it could mean the beginning of something better. He looked at her. She held his gaze. I know you can't see that clearly yet, she said. You're too inside it. But from where I'm sitting, a person who has been watching you for 3 weeks, you already know what you're going to do. You've known since you started walking. How do you know that? Because you didn't run away from this, she said. People who are going to run away from hard things run away from them. You left your territory to gather information. You were already building toward a decision. She tilted her head. You're not here because you're lost, Corveth. You're here because you needed somewhere to rest before you do something very large and very difficult. He was still. The lamp between them crackled. Something happened in his face. Not the ghost smile. Something more significant. Something that looked like relief. The particular relief of being understood. Of having someone say the true thing about you and having it land accurately. She felt it ripple through the space between them like a wave. She picked up her book. She did this deliberately, to give him the moment, to let it settle without the pressure of eye contact. After a while, she heard him breathe. Ren, he said. Thank you. You've already thanked me, she said, without looking up. Save them. You'll need them later. She felt. She was certain she felt. The ghost smile from across the room. For days later, it rained. The kind of rain that did not stop. All day and into the evening, relentless, drumming on the roof with the focused energy of something with a purpose. The settlement was quiet and inside and still. No one was going anywhere. Nothing needed doing that couldn't wait. Corveth had been making notes at the kitchen table all day. He was writing things down. She had realized, organizing the information he had gathered. Timelines. Names. She did not ask to look at it, and he did not offer to show her. This was fine. She made soup. She baked bread. She tended the fire. Around mid-afternoon, she sat beside him at the table with her own papers. She kept records for the settlement's medical needs, her own version of notes, and they worked in parallel silence for several hours while the rain continued and the house stayed warm. This was, she thought, one of the most peaceful afternoons of her adult life. She thought this carefully, aware that it was information about herself. Around early evening, she looked up and found him asleep. He had not announced it. He had not meant to do it. She could tell that from the angle of it. He had simply been sitting there working, and the warmth and the sound of the rain had done what 11 days of sleep deprivation and 4 months of grief and 3 weeks of beginning to set something down had been building toward. He was leaning sideways in his chair. His head had come to rest against her shoulder. She had not noticed when it happened. She noticed now. She sat very still, the most feared alpha alive. His face, at rest, was, she did not have a single word for it. She had been collecting words for the expressions his face did while he was awake, and none of those words applied to this. He looked young. Not in the sense of inexperienced. She had felt too much of him to believe that. In the sense of unburdened. Like sleep had set down the things he carried in a way that even the most peaceful waking moments had not managed. He was breathing slowly, deeply. She could feel, in the specific way she felt things, that he was not dreaming. Just sleep. Clean and simple and nothing else. She did not move. She did not move for a very long time. She sat there with the rain on the roof and the fire in the grate, and the most feared alpha in the northern territories asleep against her shoulder, and she let herself feel, fully, without the careful management she usually applied, what was actually present in her chest. It was terrifying. It was enormous. It was the specific, particular certainty of something that had been growing quietly for 25 days in the ordinary soil of shared meals and covered plants and cups of tea and the ghost of a smile, and was now, in the warmth of a rainy afternoon, too large to keep fitting into the space she had assigned it. She breathed very carefully. She thought about rules. She thought about her mother, who had been a practical woman and a wise one, and who had once said, "Rin, the heart is not interested in your timetable. You can work with it or you can argue with it, but arguing takes much longer." She looked at the fire. She looked at the rain against the window. She looked, just for a moment, at the face of the man asleep against her shoulder. She thought, "I am absolutely in trouble." She thought, "I have been in trouble for at least 2 weeks, and I have been pretending otherwise." She thought, all right. She closed her eyes. She let herself be in the moment. The rain and the fire and the warmth of him beside her and the clean, whole feeling of him finally at rest. She sat there until her own eyes closed. And they slept. He woke first. She felt the change, felt him surface from sleep, felt the moment of confusion, and then felt the precise instant he understood where he was and what he was doing. She kept her eyes closed. She felt him go very still. He did not move away. She felt something, enormous and careful and very specific. She opened her eyes. The fire had burned lower. The rain had eased somewhat, but was still present, quieter now. The room was dim. She had no idea how long they had been there. She turned her head slightly. He was looking at her. The distance between their faces, in their current position, was very small. She could see his eyes clearly. Dark. Still. Something in them she had felt from across a room for weeks, and was now, at close range, reading directly. "You didn't wake me," he said. "No," she said. "Why?" "Because you needed to sleep," she said. I've been leaning on your shoulder for, he checked the window, at least 2 hours. I know. And you didn't wake me. We've established this, she said. Something moved in his face. She felt him make a decision. Ren, he said. I know, she said. You know what? What you're about to say, she said. I can feel it. I've been feeling it for a while. He was quiet. And, he said. She thought about the space between them. The small, completely changed space between them. She thought about what she had felt while he was asleep. She thought about what she had decided, in that quiet hour, sitting still while the rain came down. And, she said, I feel it too. The silence that followed was not empty. It was the fullest kind of silence, the kind that happened when something important had been said and both people needed a moment to let it settle into the ground. He exhaled. She watched the tension go out of his shoulders. It was the most significant physical change she had ever seen in him. He reached up. He pushed a strand of hair back from her face, very carefully, like someone who was aware that the action was significant and wanted to be deliberate about it. I have to go back, he said. Eventually. What I have to do, I can't do it from here. I know, she said. And what I have to do might. It is very likely to cost me things. His eyes were steady on hers. I can't ask you to. You're not asking me anything, she said. I'm telling you what is true, which is that what I feel is real, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. She looked at him calmly. What you do with what you have to do is separate from that. Is it? He asked. It can be, she said. If we decide it is. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I have never met anyone like you. You've said something like that before, she said. On the first night. I know, he said. I'm saying it again because it's still true, and I want to keep saying things that are true. The fire crackled between them. She could feel, with all the specific, inconvenient, irreplaceable precision of her gift, exactly what was in the space between them. It was not a small thing. It was not a convenient thing. It was not a thing she had planned. But it was real. And she had spent 31 years believing that real things were worth taking seriously, even when they were difficult. Especially when they were difficult. Stay as long as you need to, she said. And when you're ready to go back and do what you have to do, go. She held his gaze. And if you want to come back when it's done, come back. He looked at her. That's simple, he said. Nothing about this is simple, she said. But the answer is. He stayed for another week. In that week, something changed in the quality of the days without anything needing to be announced or explained. He still helped with things around the settlement. He still came back to her kitchen in the evenings. He still sat at her table. But now there was the fact of what had been said between them, present in the room the way the fire was present, visible, warm, real. He was closer, in the simple physical sense of space and proximity that reflected something that was also true in a less physical way. He told her more about the Greyfall Pack. She told him more about her mother and the choices that had brought them to the settlement. They argued about two different things, once about medicinal plants, in a way that was enjoyable rather than serious, and once about something political that turned out to be a difference of genuine perspective that neither of them fully resolved, and that they agreed to set down for another day. She found the arguing as interesting as the agreeing. She told him so. You're not bothered by it, he said. He seemed genuinely puzzled by this. Why would I be? Most people are, he said, when I disagree with them. Because you're an alpha and they're worried about the consequence, she said. I'm not. I know, he said. Why aren't you? She considered this. Because I can feel you, she said. All the time. Even when you disagree with me. I can feel that your disagreement is honest and not hostile. Those are different things. She looked at him. A lot of conflict between people comes from not being able to tell the difference. I can always tell the difference. He thought about this. That must make arguments different, he said. It makes everything different, she said. It's why I came here. In a pack, everyone's bond is always open, always accessible. I was feeling the entire pack, all the time, all 27 of us. By the time I was 13, I could hardly hold myself separate enough to know what I was feeling versus what everyone else was feeling. And here, 43 people who have learned to hold their own emotional space, she said. People who came here for their own reasons and had to learn to be individuals before they could be a community. It's different. I still feel everything, but I have room to also feel myself. He was quiet. And me? He asked. She looked at him. You, she said carefully, are the most internally specific person I have ever felt. Most people are a general emotional weather, mostly this, a little of that. You are granular, layered. I feel things from you that I have never felt from anyone else, because most people haven't been refined down to that level of complexity. He looked back at her. Ren, he said, is that good or bad? It's extraordinary, she said. And then, because she had made a decision about saying true things, you are extraordinary. You know that, right? Not the reputation, not the fear other people have of you. You, the actual person. He was very still. She watched something move across his face. She felt it. The way a wall that has been standing for a very long time feels when something finally finds the particular frequency that resonates with it. Not breaking, not collapsing, opening. He looked away first. He looked at the fire. His voice, when it came, was quiet. The people who know me, really know me. I can count them on one hand. I know, she said. I'm not sure I've ever let anyone. He stopped. I'm not sure I knew it was possible to feel known the way you. He shook his head. I know, she said again more softly. She reached across. She put her hand over his. He turned his hand over, the same as he had that night weeks ago in her kitchen. He held on. She let him. He left on a Monday. Dawn. The sky doing its quiet work of becoming light again. The kind of morning that was cool but not cold, that smelled of coming rain and turned earth. He had his pack. He had the notes he had been making for weeks. He had what he had come for, not what he thought he had come for when he arrived on one knee at the gate, but what he had actually needed. She walked him to the gate. Orvin was there, the same warden who had been there the night Corveth arrived. He nodded to both of them. He was not, Ren thought, entirely surprised by what he was seeing. At the gate, Corveth stopped and turned. He looked at her. She looked back. I don't know how long this will take, he said. Take as long as it takes, she said. It could go badly, he said. I know. If it does, then it does, she said. And you deal with what comes. Ren. Corveth. He searched her face. I am going to try, he said, to do this right. Not perfectly. I'm not sure perfect is available, but right. I know, she said. That's why you're going. He reached up. He put his hand against the side of her face. She leaned into it, slightly, just slightly. Come back, she said, returning those words, giving them back to him the way he'd given them to her, in that tent. Weeks ago in another story that was connected to this one. He understood. She could feel that he understood. He nodded. He turned. He walked through the gate and into the morning. She watched him go. She stood at the gate long after his figure had disappeared into the tree lane. She stood until Orvin cleared his throat gently. He'll come back, Orvin said. Not with false confidence. With simple matter-of-fact certainty, the kind of man who watches gates develops about the people who go through them. I know, she said, and she went back to her garden. She covered the sage plants. She made tea. She lived her quiet, small, extraordinary life. And she waited. The waiting was not passive. She was not a person who knew how to be passive. She had tried it once, when she was young, and found it to be the most exhausting thing she had ever done. It was much more efficient to be active while also being patient. She tended the settlement. She helped when she was needed. She argued in council meetings she had declined to formally join but attended anyway, which was a distinction that Petal found amusing. She read everything she could find about the history of packed territories in the northern region, which was both educational and worrying. She wrote letters, which she had no way to send, because she didn't know exactly where he was or how he was moving. She wrote them anyway and kept them in a box and told herself it was just a way of thinking on paper. 3 weeks after he left, the first news arrived. It came through the settlement's closest trading contact, a traveling exchange merchant named Borden who passed through every month with goods and, inevitably, information. Borden said there was something happening with the Greyfall pack, something internal. He didn't know the details. Nobody did yet. But the Greyfall pack had called a formal council of elders, unprecedented in recent memory, and then had sent out 2 separate emissaries in different directions, and whatever it was about, it was significant. Ren listened to this and felt, from 40 miles away or however far Corveth was by now, absolutely nothing, which meant he was too far, which should not have surprised her and yet landed with a particular loneliness she had not expected. She told herself this was fine. She went back to work. 6 weeks after he left, something happened at the settlement that no one had been expecting. 2 wolves arrived. They came with no hostility. They identified themselves immediately as scouts from a pack called the Stern Hollow Pack, which Ren did not know the name of. They said they had been directed here, specifically to the Ashvale settlement, by a recommendation. They would not say whose recommendation. They said they had a request. They asked to speak to the settlement council. The council met with them. What they said, what came out in that meeting, was this. The Stern Hollow Pack was one of the packs whose people had been scattered 40 years ago when the Greyfall Pack's founder had driven them from their territory. They had been tracking down leads for 3 months, trying to understand what was happening, trying to determine if the Greyfall Alpha's inquiries, the quiet, careful information gathering that people had noticed and discussed, were genuine or a trap. They had been directed here because someone had told them that the Ashvale settlement had recently hosted the Greyfall Alpha, and that the person he had spent the most time with was a woman with a particular kind of gift. They wanted to know if what he was doing was real. They wanted to know if they could trust him. The council looked at Ren. She sat with this for a moment. Then she said, he left his pack and walked until his legs gave out because he couldn't hold what he knew and keep leading the way he had been leading. He spent 6 weeks in this settlement doing hard physical work without being asked, not because he needed to prove something, but because it was his nature. He lost sleep over the truth. He didn't need enough. He wrote notes at my kitchen table, trying to build a framework for doing something that might cost him everything he has ever been given. She looked at the Stern Hollow scouts. Yes, she said. It's real. He is real. The scouts looked at each other. Then they nodded. They said they would take this back. They thanked her. They left. Petal, after they had gone, sat beside Ren in the now quiet council room and said nothing for a while. You trust him completely, she said. Yes, Ren said. How? Because I felt him, Ren said. For 6 weeks. Every day, I felt what was actually in him, not what he wanted to project, not what his reputation says he should be. What was actually there? She looked at her hands. He is one of the most genuinely good people I have ever felt. And that is not a small thing to say, given what I can feel. Petal was quiet. I hope he comes back, she said. He will, Ren said. He came back in the early winter. 3.5 months after he had walked through the gate at dawn. She felt him before she heard the gate. She had been in the settlement's small library, helping catalog some new materials. She was mid-sentence, helping the librarian with something, when the feeling hit. Specific. Unmistakable. She set down what she was holding. I'm sorry, she said to the librarian. I'll be back. She walked to the gate. He was already inside. He had not arrived on one knee this time. He was standing upright. His coat was travel-worn, but he had a coat. His hair had been cut, she noticed, sometime in the last 3 months. His face was different. Not lighter, exactly, but resolved. Like something that had been warring in him had come to a resting point. He saw her coming and stopped. She stopped a few feet from him. She looked at him. He looked at her. Hello, she said. Hello, he said. She felt, with all of her specific, exact, involuntary precision, what was in the space between them. It was the same thing. It was larger. She breathed. Are you all right? She asked. He started. Stopped. Yes. I think so. It went. He shook his head. It went the way I hoped it would. Not all of it. Some of it went worse. Some of it went better. He looked at her. I met with the Stern Hollow representatives. I know, she said. They came here. Something moved in his face. What did you tell them? The truth, she said. What I know of you. He was very still. I made an agreement with the Stern Hollow Pack, he said. A formal one. The council approved it. It took every bit of political work I have ever done in 15 years to bring them to agreement. There are provisions. A process. It will take years to fully address. But it has been acknowledged. Formally. In writing. His voice was careful and precise, and she could feel beneath it the exhaustion, and beneath that, the cleansing quality of having done a hard, right thing. The Greyfall Pack is not gone. But it is different now. I am different now. I know, she said. Ren. Yes. I came back, he said. Like it was important to say it. Like he needed to say it simply and directly. I see that, she said. I told you I would. You did. He crossed the distance between them. He was looking at her the way he had in the dim light of the rainy afternoon. Close and specific and real. I don't know how to do this, he said. Any of this. A gesture that seemed to include her, the settlement, everything beyond the Greyfall Pack that he had always existed within. I know how to lead a pack. I know how to negotiate and fight and hold a territory. I don't know how to. I know you don't, she said. I want to learn, he said. If you're willing. She looked at him. She felt everything in the space between them. Real. Enormous. Frightening in the way only true things were frightening. Not because they were dangerous, but because they mattered. I'm willing, she said. He reached up. He pushed the strand of hair from her face, the same as he had the first time. Deliberate. Careful. Like he was aware of the weight of the gesture. She stepped forward into the space he offered. He put his arms around her. She felt, completely, specifically, exactly, the particular quality of someone who has been carrying something enormous finally, being allowed to set it down. She held on. He held on. Orvin, at the gate, looked in the other direction. The settlement went about its business around them. The winter morning was cold and clear and still. This is what she would say when people asked her later, and people did ask, because stories like this one traveled, Because the world was smaller than it seemed and things like this did not stay contained, she would say. He arrived at my gate on one knee. He had not slept in 11 days. He was the most feared person in 4 territories, and he had walked until his legs gave out. And what I felt from him, in that first moment, was not power and not danger and not the weight of his reputation. I felt someone who needed somewhere to put things down, and I had a place, so I gave it to him. And in return, though that wasn't why I did it, it wasn't a transaction. In return, he gave me something I hadn't known I was missing. The specific, irreplaceable experience of being felt by someone in return. He couldn't do what she could. He was not an empath. He could not feel her the way she felt him. But what he did, the way he listened, the way he remembered, the way he was fully present in every conversation like nothing else in the world existed while she was talking, that was its own kind of feeling. It turned out that there was more than one way to truly know a person, and knowing, truly, was the rarest and most precious thing. This is what he would say when asked. I had been afraid for a long time. Not of anything external, of the inside of myself, of what was in there, the grief, the secret, the weight of what my pack had been built on. I was afraid that if I stopped moving, stopped leading, stopped being useful and necessary and formidable, there would be nothing underneath. I walked until my legs quit, and I found someone who sat with me in the silence and felt what was actually there and said, "This is real. You are real. And it is all right." That was the beginning. Everything else, the pack, the agreement, the long hard work of making right what had been made wrong. All of that was possible because she sat with me in the quiet and was not afraid of what she found. The most feared alpha alive. And she made him tea and told him what he actually needed before he could say it. And did not once, in all the months that followed, look at him with the particular expression that people used when they saw power. That expression that was partly awe and partly fear and partly calculation. She looked at him like he was a person, just a person, and in doing so, she gave him back to himself. The forest does not care about your fear. But sometimes, in the dark, you walk until you can't anymore. And someone opens a gate. And they feed you and they sit with you, and they feel you clearly, all the way through. And the most feared thing in the world turns out to be, not worthless, not empty, not the hollow creature fear sometimes made him feel he might be when no one was watching, but full, complicated and layered and grieving and carrying too much and capable of extraordinary things. Just like every other person who has ever walked until they couldn't. The fear was never the truth. The truth was underneath it. Always. You just needed someone who could feel it clearly enough to tell you it was there. And if this story settled into you somewhere, if you felt Rin's patience and Corveth's breaking point, if you held your breath in that rainy afternoon when the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories fell asleep against her shoulder like a man who had finally found somewhere safe. If this story gave you something you needed today, even a small thing, even just the feeling of being inside something real for a little while, then you already know what this channel is about. We don't do surface stories here. We go all the way down. We tell the stories where the love costs something and the grief is real and the resolution isn't perfect, but it's honest. We tell the stories about the people who walk until their legs give out and find something extraordinary at the gate. If that is what you've been looking for, if this is the kind of story you want more of, then this channel is yours. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not for us, for you, so that the next time you need a story that goes all the way down, you know exactly where to find it. We have more. Corveth and Rin's story is the kind that continues, in other characters, other gates, other fires, and rainy afternoons and moments when the most defended person you've ever seen finally, quietly, lets you see what's underneath. We'll be here every week with another one. Like this video, so we know it found the right people. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us the one moment in this story that got you. The one moment you had to stop and just breathe for a second. We read every single one. We'll see you in the next story.